The closure order arrived on a Friday. This was, as it happened, the worst possible day for it to arrive. Not because Fridays were special in any diplomatic sense. The Confederation's bureaucratic calendar did not recognize the human week as a meaningful unit, but because Friday was the day that the human embassy on Station Calais ran its open community program. Every Friday, the embassy's ground floor common area was open to any station resident who wanted to come in for what the program's description called informal cultural exchange, and what in practice meant food, conversation, and the particular organized chaos that developed when a human diplomatic mission decided that diplomacy worked better when it was also hospitable. The closure order came through the official channel at 09:15. The open program started at 10 lay. Ambassador Dr. Yemi Ozi read the order at 09:17, standing at her desk with her morning tea, and then read it again. The order was from the Confederation's Station Administration Authority, signed by Station Director Vel Morvan, and it cited three provisions of the Station Habitation Code, 7.4, which concerned space utilization disputes, 12.1, which concerned diplomatic mission operational parameters, and 19.8, which concerned unresolved administrative compliance matters. The order gave the embassy 72 hours to cease operations and vacate the premises. Yemi put down her tea. She read the order a third time, specifically the citation of provision 19.8, unresolved administrative compliance matters. She thought about the compliance matters that the embassy had in fact been in correspondence with the Station Administration Authority about for the preceding 6 months. A space utilization question involving the embassy's community garden on the roof level, a noise assessment from a neighbor's complaint about the Friday program, a parking allocation dispute involving the embassy's vehicle spaces. None of these were resolved. All of them had been in active correspondence. None of them had been described in any of that correspondence. As approaching closure order severity, she called her deputy, Coordinator Marcus Webb, who arrived in her office in 4 minutes with the expression of someone who had already seen the order on the official channel. 72 hours, he said. Yes, she said. The community program starts in 43 minutes. She looked at the window. The station's morning light was the particular amber of early hours. Below, through the embassy's ground floor windows, she could see the setup happening, tables being arranged, the Friday food preparation, the decorative items that were brought out specifically for the open program. We're running the program, she said. Marcus looked at her. The order is being reviewed, she said. We have 72 hours. The program runs for 3 hours. We will run the program and simultaneously begin the response to the order. She looked at the window again. Get me Station Director Vel Morvan's schedule. I want a meeting today. His office will. Today, she said. Find a way. She went to get changed for the program. The Friday Open program at the Human Embassy had been running for 2 years. It had not been designed strategically. It had been designed practically, by Yemi's predecessor, Ambassador Chen, who had noticed in his first month at Station Calais that the embassy's relationship with the station's general population was formal in ways that were limiting. The diplomatic relationships with official delegations were well managed. The relationship with the people who actually lived on the station, the residents, the workers, the families, the individuals who occupied the community that the embassy was embedded in, was essentially non-existent. Ambassador Chen had started the Friday program to address this. He had described it, in his briefing to Yemi when she took over, as the most valuable thing the embassy did that wasn't in any official diplomatic record. She had continued it. 2 years of Fridays. The program had grown. In the first months, attendance had been small. A few curious station residents, some embassy staff's personal connections, the particular category of person who showed up to new things on general principle. Over time, it had expanded. Word moved the way word moved in a station community, specific and personal. One person telling another that there was a place on Fridays that had good food and interesting conversation, and did not require you to be anyone other than who you were. The station's residents who came to the Friday program came from 23 species. Some came every week, some came occasionally, some had come once, years ago, and sent someone else instead, who also came. The program did not track attendance in any official way. The embassy staff knew most of the regulars by name. There was also the dog. The dog's name was Biscuit. He was a medium-sized, brown and white individual of mixed domestic canine heritage who had arrived at the embassy as a companion animal for a junior cultural attaché and had, over 18 months, become the program's most recognized feature. Biscuit attended every Friday program. He moved through the common area with the genial, unhurried interest of an animal that had decided the Friday program was a good situation and saw no reason to be anywhere else. He had a specific behavior. When he met someone new, he would approach. He would sniff the offered hand if offered, or the nearest available surface if not. And then he would sit, look at the person, and lift one front paw. This was what the embassy staff called the offer. He offered his paw, not demanding, not performing, offering, in the specific way of something that had learned. This was a way to make contact, and had decided it was the right approach. Most species took the paw. The ones who didn't, he waited for, and tried again. Yemi had watched Biscuit work a room for 2 years. She had watched him approach species who had never seen a domestic canine and who were uncertain how to respond, and she had watched the uncertainty resolve as the paw was offered and taken, and the contact was made, and the animal's complete absence of agenda became apparent to whoever he was with. She thought, walking down to the Friday program at 09:55 with the closure order active in the official system and 72 hours counting down, that of all the things the embassy had built over 2 years, Biscuit was the one that had done it most efficiently and with the least documentation. The Friday program that day was the same as every Friday program and also not the same, because Yemi was running a diplomatic response in parallel. She was present. She talked to people. She ate the food and asked about the week and listened to what people told her. The Friday program required her presence and required it to be actual rather than performed, and she had learned in 2 years that this difference was perceptible to the people in the room and mattered. She was also, between conversations, on her communication device. Marcus had reached Station Director Vel Morvan's office. The director was not available for a same-day meeting. He was available tomorrow morning at 09. She confirmed 09. She put the device away and went back to the room. The room was, as it was every Friday, full of the particular energy of a space where people who didn't see each other regularly were seeing each other. Conversations in multiple languages. The translation systems working quietly, Food being shared across the tables in the way food got shared when no one was being careful about it, Biscuit was in the far corner with a family from the Myrith delegation who had been coming every Friday for 6 months. The Myrith were small and quick and had initially been very uncertain about Biscuit, who was significantly larger than most things they were comfortable being near. They had spent the first 3 weeks watching him from a distance. At week 4, the youngest member of the family, a child who was apparently less careful than her parents, had let him sniff her hand. He had offered his paw. She had taken it. Now they arrived early every Friday and went directly to wherever Biscuit was. Yemi watched this family for a moment. Then she was approached by Drell, who was a regular attendee, an older Karathi man who had been a cargo supervisor on the station for 30 years and who came every Friday for the food and stayed for the conversation. He had, over 2 years of Fridays, become one of the people Yemi trusted most on the station, because his perspective was the perspective of someone who had been there long enough to understand it without having any stake in the official version of it. Aired. "Something's wrong," he said. It was not a question. She looked at him. "The order," she said. She told him. She told him directly. Aired. Because Drell's value was his directness, and responding to it with something other than directness would have been a waste of both their time. He listened. He was quiet for a moment. "The compliance matters," he said. Aired. "The roof garden, the noise complaint, the parking." "Yes, the noise complaint was from the Keithian Business Association," he said. "Third floor of the adjacent building." She looked at him. "I know the building." Aired. He said. "I've worked cargo on this station for 30 years. The Keithian Business Association has been trying to acquire that space for expansion for 18 months. The embassy's lease is the obstacle." He paused. Aired. "Station Director Vel Morvan's family has business interests that overlap with the Keithian Association." She was quiet. "I don't know that this is what's happening," he said. Aired. "I know those facts, and I'm telling you the facts." She thought about Provision 19.8, Unresolved Administrative Compliance Matters. Aired. She thought about 6 months of correspondence on a noise complaint from the adjacent building. "Thank you," she said. "The meeting is tomorrow," he said. "09, he nodded. Aired. "I'll be available if you need someone who knows the station's administrative history." She looked at him. "You'd be willing to." "I come to this program every Friday," he said simply. "It matters." Aired. "I'd rather it continue." He went back to his table. Yemi stood for a moment. She looked at the room, at the Myrath family with Biscuit, at the tables of people from 23 species sharing food on a Friday morning. Aired. At the program that had grown from a small practical decision made by her predecessor into something that residents made a point of attending. She went to find Marcus. The 09 aired. 00 meeting with Station Director Velmore Ban was in the Administration Authority's main conference room, aired, which was a formal space in the way that authority spaces were formal, designed to communicate the weight of institutional decision-making and the permanence of the decisions made there, aired. Yemi arrived with Marcus and the embassy's legal advisor, a careful Velhari woman named Coordinator Shen, who had been reviewing the order and the relevant provisions since Friday afternoon, aired. Station Director Vel Morvan arrived with 2 administration officials and a legal representative. The meeting began with the director presenting the basis for the order, which was what Yemi had already read, aired. Provision 7.4, 12.1, and 19.8. He presented it in the precise, measured language of someone who had prepared the presentation and was delivering it correctly. When he finished, Yemi said, aired. "I'd like to address each provision specifically." He indicated she could. Coordinator Shen presented the legal review. Provision 7.4 Space Utilization Disputes, aired. The embassy had responded to all correspondence regarding the roof garden within the required time frame and had submitted the requested documentation, aired. The provision's threshold for closure order action required a finding of bad faith non-compliance, which the correspondence record did not support. Provision 12.1 Diplomatic Mission Operational Parameters, aired. The embassy's operational parameters were within the framework of the diplomatic mission agreement signed at the time of establishment. No amendment to that agreement had been filed or approved. Provision 19.8 aired. Unresolved administrative compliance matters. 3 items were listed: the roof garden, the noise complaint, and the parking allocation. All 3 were in active correspondence. Active correspondence was aired, per the provision's own language, not a condition of unresolved status. Unresolved required a documented failure to respond. Shen laid out the correspondence record for each item. Dates of inquiry, dates of response, aired. Content of responses. The director's legal representative reviewed the records. She asked 2 questions. Shen answered both. The room was quiet. Vel Morvian looked at the records. He looked at his legal representative, aired. The legal representative said, very carefully, The correspondence record does present a challenge for the 19.8 citation. Morvan was quiet. Yemi said, "Director, I'd like to understand the intent behind the order." The compliance matters you've cited are ones we've been in active dialogue about for 6 months. None of them have been characterized in any of that dialogue as approaching closure order severity. If there's a concern that hasn't been communicated through the correspondence, I'd like to hear it directly. Morvan looked at her. He said, "There have been concerns about the Friday program." "What kind of concerns?" "The program draws significant foot traffic to the embassy's location. There have been concerns from neighboring tenants about congestion in the common corridors." "We've received no formal complaint about corridor congestion," Yemi said. "The concerns were communicated informally to the administration authority." "Yes, not to the embassy." A pause. "Not directly." Yemi looked at the director. She thought about Drell's information. She thought about the Keithian Business Association and the expansion and the 18 months of interest in the space. She thought about what she could say and what she should say and what would be useful. She said, "I understand there are competing interests in the space. I'm not here to dispute anyone's interests. I'm here to discuss how to address legitimate concerns through the appropriate process." She paused. "The appropriate process is direct communication." "If there are specific concerns about the Friday program's impact on neighboring tenants, we can discuss modifications, timing, capacity, corridor management." "These are solvable problems if they're raised through dialogue rather than closure orders." Vel Morvan was quiet. His legal representative said something quietly to him. He listened. "The closure order could be suspended," he said slowly, "pending a review of the specific concerns." "I'd welcome that," Yemi said. "The review would require the embassy's cooperation with an operational assessment." "Of course," she said. "And the Friday program would need to be limited to station residents only, not open to the general public during the review period." She thought about the room on Friday, about the people who came, about Drell and the Mirith family and Biscuit and the 23 species. "Defined station residents," she said. The legal representative conferred with Vel Morvan. "Individuals with valid station registration. The Friday program's attendees are primarily station residents," she said. "A small number are visitors in transit who attend because they were told about it by station residents. We can work with that definition." She paused. "I'd like the review timeline to be specified, and I'd like the concerns to be documented formally so we can respond to them formally." The negotiation took 2 more hours. At the end, the closure order was sentenced pending a 90-day review. The review would assess the specific operational concerns, which would be documented and shared with the embassy within 10 days. The Friday program would continue under the station resident definition. A formal dialogue process would be established for ongoing compliance matters. Yemi thanked the director. He was formally polite in return. She left with Marcus and coordinator Shen. In the corridor, Marcus said, "That could have been worse." "It could have been better," she said. "We have 90 days and a review. That's the situation." She thought about what 90 days meant. About the review and the documented concerns and the dialogue process. She thought about what Drell had said. The Keithian Business Association and the expansion and the 18 months. She thought about what she had not said in the meeting, because what she had not said was the more useful thing. Not the confrontation of the interest, but the work of making the program's value undeniable, and making the closure of it cost more than the space was worth. She had 90 days. She was going to use them. The 10 days of documented concerns produced a formal list of 7 items. Corridor congestion on Friday mornings was first. Noise levels were second. Refuse management outside the building was third. The remaining 4 were variations on the space utilization and parking issues that had been in the correspondence for 6 months. Yemi read the list with Marcus and Shen. All of these are addressable, Shen said. Aired. Yes, Yemi said. That's the point. She looked at the list. We're going to address every single one of them, formally, with documentation. Aired. And we're going to do it in a way that makes the review produce no finding of concern. She paused. And we're going to keep running the Friday program. Marcus said. Aired. The corridor congestion is a timing and flow issue. We work with the building management on a corridor access schedule. The noise levels, we get an independent assessment and we adjust. Aired. The refuse management we fix immediately. She looked at the list, 7 items, 90 days. We have time. She was also doing something else, aired, which she had been doing since Friday and which was not in the formal response strategy. She was making calls, not to the administration authority, to the people who came to the Friday program, aired, to the station's resident community that the program had been building for 2 years, to Drell, who knew the station's administrative history, and to the Myrith family's senior member, aired, who was a registered community representative, and to a Korathi business owner who had been coming every Friday for 8 months, and who knew Velmorvan professionally, and had offered, when she called, aired, to have an informal conversation with him. She was not asking anyone to intervene. She was informing people who cared about the program that the program was under review, that the embassy was addressing every concern aired, and that the program would continue. She was letting the community know what was happening. The operational assessment visit happened in the 3rd week of the review period, aired. 2 officials from the administration authority came to the embassy on a Tuesday to conduct the assessment. They arrived at 10:00, which was not a Friday. They were met by Marcus, aired, who showed them through the embassy and answered their questions. He showed them the corridor access schedule that had been developed with the building management. He showed them the noise assessment, aired, conducted by an independent assessor, which had produced a recommended adjustment to the program's music policy that the embassy had already implemented. He showed them the Lee revised refuse management protocol, aired, with documentation. He also showed them the Friday program's 2-year attendance record, which the embassy had compiled for the review. Not names, the program didn't track names. Account by week, aired, with notation of species represented. The officials reviewed the documentation. They asked several questions. Marcus answered each one. At 12:30, the officials concluded the assessment visit. At the door, aired, one of them, a younger Velhari official who had been quieter during the assessment than her colleague, stopped. She said, "I've heard about the Friday program." Marcus looked at her. "My neighbor comes," she said, aired. "She's Myrith. She talks about it." She paused. "She talks about the dog." Marcus thought about Biscuit. "He's a regular feature," he said. The official was quiet for a moment, aired. "She said he offered her daughter his paw the first time she came. She'd never met a dog before. She said her daughter remembered it for weeks." Marcus nodded. The official left, aired. Marcus went to tell Yemi about the conversation. She listened. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Biscuit's been doing more diplomacy than we have," she said finally. "He's been doing it longer," Marcus said, aired. She thought about 2 years of Fridays and a paw offered to someone who had never met a dog before and a child who remembered it for weeks. "Make sure he's at the next Friday program," she said, aired. Marcus gave her an expression that indicated this was not a thing that required management. The review concluded on the 87th day of the 90-day period, aired. The administration authority's review report found that the embassy had addressed all 7 documented concerns satisfactorily. The corridor congestion concern was resolved through the building access schedule, aired. The noise concern was resolved through the independent assessment and the policy adjustment. The refuse management concern was resolved, aired. The remaining 4 items were found to be within compliance given the correspondence record. The closure order was formally withdrawn. Yemi received the notification on a Thursday afternoon. She read it, aired. She forwarded it to Marcus and Shen with a note that said, "Acknowledged." Friday program continues. Then she made a call. She called Drell. He answered immediately. "The order is withdrawn," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. "Thank you for the information," she said, "and for the offer to help. Did you need it?" "The Karathi business owner you know." He spoke to Vel Morvan. "I don't know what he said." The director was more flexible in the second meeting than the first. Drell said, "He's been coming to the Fridays for 8 months." He made his own decision about whether the program was worth supporting. She thought about that. About 8 months of Fridays and food and conversation and a dog who offered his paw. "Come tomorrow," she said. "I come every Friday," he said. She went to prepare for the program. The Friday program that followed the closure order's withdrawal was not different from any other Friday program. The tables were arranged the same way. The food was the same food. The people who came because it was Friday and they came on Fridays. Biscuit moved through the room with the same genial, unhurried interest he brought to every program. The Myrith family arrived early, as they always did, and went directly to find him. The youngest child, who had been the first of her family to take Biscuit's paw, was older now than she had been when she started coming. Old enough to have developed the specific confident ease of someone who knew where they were and was glad to be there. She went to Biscuit, and he offered his paw, and she took it with the particular matter-of-fact warmth of something that had become a ritual. Yemi watched from across the room. She thought about the closure order, and the 72 hours, and the meeting with Vel Morvan, and the 7 documented concerns, and the 87 days. She thought about what had been deployed in those 87 days. Legal analysis, correspondence records, an independent noise assessment, a corridor management schedule, calls to community members. An informal conversation between a business owner and a station director. All of it necessary. All of it legitimate. All of it the work of protecting something by demonstrating its value in the language the threat spoke. And then she thought about a small child taking a dog's paw on a Friday 2 years ago and telling her mother about it, and the mother telling a colleague, and the colleague mentioning it to an administration authority official during an operational assessment visit. She thought about what the official had said. She said her daughter remembered it for weeks. She thought about what Biscuit had done, which was to approach and sniff and sit and offer and wait. No agenda, no strategy, no documentation, just presence and patience and a paw held out to whoever was there. She thought about 2 years of that, accumulated Friday by Friday, becoming the thing that made the program worth the corridor schedule and the noise assessment, and the 87 days of review. She thought about what her predecessor had said. The most valuable thing the embassy does that isn't in any official diplomatic record. She went to find Drell, who was at his usual table with his usual food, talking to a Velhari technician, who came every few weeks when his shift schedule allowed it. She sat down with them. The program continued around her, the particular organized chaos of a room full of people who had somewhere they wanted to be and had found it. Biscuit made his way around the room. He approached a new face, a young Rithal, who had come for the first time and was standing slightly uncertain at the edge of the gathering. He sniffed, he sat, he offered his paw. The Rithal looked at him, then, slowly reached out and took it. Yemi watched from across the room. She thought, there it is, the thing that couldn't be documented. The thing that happened between two beings in a room when one of them made an offering with no conditions attached, and the other accepted it, and something shifted in the space between them. She had been in diplomatic work for 16 years. She had sat in conference rooms and signed agreements and negotiated provisions and managed the formal mechanisms of relationship between institutions. She knew how those mechanisms worked, and she believed they mattered. She also knew, watching a Rethal take a dog's paw on a Friday morning aired that something was happening in this room that the formal mechanisms had never quite been able to produce on their own. She was going to keep running the program aired. She was going to keep filing the documentation and managing the compliance concerns and attending the administrative review meetings. And she was going to make sure Biscuit was there every Friday. He was already there, aired. He always was. Station director Vel Morvan attended the Friday program 6 weeks after the closure order was withdrawn. He came alone, not officially. He arrived at 10:30, which was when the program was at its fullest, aired, and stood at the entrance for a moment before the embassy staff member at the door welcomed him in and found him a place at one of the tables. Yemi saw him come in. She did not approach immediately, aired. She gave him 10 minutes with the room, with the food, with the people who were there because they came every Friday. Then she went to his table. She sat down. "Director," she said. "Ambassador," he said, aired. He looked at the room. "This is larger than I expected." "It's groans," she said. He watched the room for a moment, the conversations, the food being passed, the various species at the various tables, aired. He watched a Polari engineer and a Korathi trader deep in what appeared to be an animated discussion about something technical. He watched the Myrith family at their usual table. He watched Biscuit, aired, who was working his way through the room with the same method he always used. "The dog, Biscuit," she said. He watched Biscuit approach a table of 3 Velhari residents who were regulars. Biscuit sniffed, aired, sat, offered. One of the Velhari took the paw. The other 2 laughed at something one of them said. Biscuit wagged once and moved on. Vel Morvan was quiet for a moment. "The noise complaint," he said, aired. "The Keithian Association." She waited. "There are interests I have to balance," he said. It was not exactly an apology, aired. It was an explanation offered by someone who was deciding how much of the truth to put into a sentence. "I understand that," she said. "The review process was appropriate," she said. "The concerns were real concerns, aired. We addressed them. That's how it's supposed to work." He looked at her. "You're not." He started. "Angry?" she said. "No, the program is still running. The concerns are addressed. That's the outcome I wanted," aired. He was quiet. Biscuit arrived at their table. He sniffed Vel Morvan's hand, which was resting on the table. He sat. He offered his paw. Vel Morvan looked at the dog. He looked at the paw. He took it, aired. Biscuit's tail moved once. Slowly, Yemi watched. She thought, there it is again. The same thing, every time. The same small moment of contact between 2 beings in a room. The same absence of agenda from one side, aired. The same shift in the other. She thought about 16 years of diplomatic work and what you could achieve with formal mechanisms and what you couldn't. She thought about a dog on a Friday morning. She thought, aired, some things can't be documented, but they can be built, Friday by Friday, paw by paw. She looked at the room full of people from 23 species on a Friday morning. She thought, aired, this is what it looks like when it's working. She went to get food. Biscuit moved on to the next table, aired. The program's 90-day review had produced something Yemi had not planned for specifically, but had been working toward generally, aired. The administration authority's review officer, the younger Velhari woman whose neighbor came to the Fridays, had filed an addendum to the review report that was not standard practice, but which the authority had accepted, aired. The addendum was titled Community Integration Assessment, and it documented, in the careful language of a bureaucratic document, what the Friday program had produced in 2 years of operation, aired. The addendum cited 23 species represented in regular attendance, aired. It noted that the program had been referenced in 7 separate official community feedback submissions to the Station Administration Authority as a positive community feature, aired, which was the highest reference rate for any single community program on the station. It included a section on what the program's station residents described, in their own words, aired, as its value, Responses to a voluntary survey the review officer had conducted after the assessment visit. The responses were varied in their specifics and consistent in their direction. People described the program as a place where they saw neighbors they didn't otherwise see, as a place where they had conversations that led to things. Collaborations, friendships, the specific informal networks that made a station community function better than its formal structures could produce alone. As a place where, several respondents noted in different words, they felt welcome. One respondent, listed anonymously, had written, "I came the first Friday not knowing what to expect. The dog offered me his paw. I have been going every Friday since." I'm not sure I can explain the connection between those two things, but it's there. The review officer had included this response in the addendum without comment. She had, Yemi suspected, included it because she thought it was true. Yemi had read the addendum 3 times. She had sent the review officer a formal thank you through appropriate channels. She had also, less formally, made a note of the officer's name in her own records, filed under people who paid attentions. She thought about the addendum's documentation of 2 years of Fridays, the 23 species, the 7 community feedback submissions, the voluntary survey responses. She thought about what the addendum represented, the formal record of something that had not been designed for formal records but had produced them anyway, through the accumulation of small moments that were individually undocumented and collectively unmistakable. She thought, this is how it builds. 3 months after the closure order was withdrawn, the Human Embassy's community program received its first formal recognition from the Station Administration Authority. The recognition was a community integration citation, which the authority gave annually to programs that had demonstrated positive contribution to station community cohesion. The citation was presented at a brief ceremony in the authority's administrative hall. Station Director Vel Morvan presented it, which Yemi had not expected. He had made the decision himself. She understood, from how the ceremony went, that it was a genuine decision rather than a procedural one. He gave a brief address at the ceremony. He said that the Friday program was an example of diplomatic mission activity that extended beyond formal diplomatic function and contributed directly to the station community. He said that the administration authority recognized this as valuable. He said it in the precise, measured language of someone who had prepared the remarks carefully. There was nothing in the remarks that could be read as an apology. There was nothing in the remarks that referenced the closure order. There was also nothing in the remarks that needed to be aired. Yemi accepted the citation and thanked the director and the authority in the appropriate formal terms. She went home with Marcus and coordinator Shen, and they ate together at the embassy and talked about the 90 days and what the citation meant and what came next. What came next was the following Friday. The program ran as it always ran. The tables, the food, the people who came because they came on Fridays. The 23 species aired. Plus one new face that Marcus didn't recognize, who turned out to be the neighbor of the Administration Authority review officer, who had told her about it after the review was completed. 24 species aired. Biscuit moved through the room at 11:30. The young Vilhari review officer arrived. She was off duty. She was not there in any official capacity. She was there because she had filed an addendum to a review report about a program and had wanted to see it for herself. She stood at the entrance for a moment. Marcus saw her and went to welcome her in. He found her a place at one of the tables. Biscuit arrived at her table approximately 7 minutes later. He sniffed, he sat, he offered. She looked at him. She took his paw. She stayed for the full 3 hours of the program. She came back the following Friday. And the Friday after that, Yemi wrote a report to the Diplomatic Missions Home Office at the end of the year. It was the standard annual summary. Operational activities, diplomatic relationships managed, issues addressed, Outcomes achieved. In the section on community engagement aired, she described the Friday program in the standard terms: attendance, species represented, community integration outcomes, the recognition from the administration authority. She had a habit, in her annual reports aired, of including a section she called observations aired, which was not a standard section, but which her home office had come to expect and read with the specific attention given to things that were honest about what formal reports left out. In the observations section aired, she wrote the Friday program's most significant outcomes are not documentable in the standard formats aired. They are the specific quality of a community space where the normal transactional logic of diplomatic interaction is suspended, and what remains is contact between people who are not primarily representing institutions aired. This space produces things: trust, familiarity, the informal networks that make formal relationships work better, that the formal diplomatic record does not show and cannot produce through formal means aired. The closure order and the 90-day review and the community citation that followed demonstrated that the program had built something real. Real enough that when it was threatened, aired, the people who had been part of it considered it worth defending. Real enough that the official who reviewed it documented its value before she ever attended it and then attended it herself. We have a dog, aired. He offers his paw to anyone who comes. He has been doing this for 2 years without strategy or documentation or diplomatic intent. He has, by any measure I can construct, aired, produced more goodwill per hour than any other element of the program. I include this not as humor but as an honest operational observation. There is something in what he does, the unconditional offer, aired, the willingness to wait, the complete absence of anything other than the gesture, that the formal diplomatic toolkit does not contain and cannot replicate, aired. We would do well to understand why it works and to think about how the human elements of our practice might more closely approximate it. She read this back, she left it in, she submitted the report, aired. The report was read by the Home Office's regional director, who had been in diplomatic service for 22 years and who read the observation section, the way she read all of Yemi's observation sections, aired, which was carefully and with the specific attention she reserved for things that were honest. She read the paragraph about the dog. She read it again. She made a note in her own file, aired. The file she kept for observations worth keeping. The note said, Osei's point about the unconditional offer, worth thinking about, aired. What does it mean for practice that a dog can produce goodwill that formal diplomacy cannot? And what does it say about formal diplomacy that we have to look at a dog to see it? She paused. She added, the offer, aired, the willingness to wait, the absence of agenda. These are not complicated. They may be the most important things. We spend considerable effort on the complex parts and less on these. She closed the file, aired. She moved on to the next report in her queue. Below, in 17 stations across the Confederation, aired. 17 human diplomatic missions ran their various programs and managed their various relationships and produced their various formal and informal outcomes. And, on Station Calith, every Friday at 10:00, aired, the doors of the human embassy opened. People came in. A dog moved through the room. He sniffed. He sat. He offered his paw. He waited. He always waited, not anxiously, not impatiently, aired, with the specific settled quality of something that had offered something genuine and was content to let the other party decide what to do with it. Most of them took the paw. The ones who didn't, he waited for, aired, and tried again. And they came back, they always came back, 2 years after the closure order, aired. Yemi received a request from a junior diplomat who was preparing for her first posting at a human embassy on a station where the diplomatic mission had been struggling to connect with the local community, aired. The junior diplomat, her name was Senna. She was 3 years out of her training program, had read the annual reports from Station Calith, and had specific questions about the Friday program. She asked 5 questions, aired. They were good questions, specific and practical. How did the program get started? What made it grow? How did you handle resistance from official channels? What's Digital's most important thing about running it? Aired. Yemi answered the first three questions directly. The program had started as a practical response to a gap. It had grown through word of mouth because the people who came found it worth coming back to. Aired. The resistance from official channels had been handled by addressing every legitimate concern completely, maintaining the record, and ensuring that the community value was visible. Aired. She sat with the fourth question longer, the single most important thing. She thought about 2 years of Fridays. Aired. She thought about the compliance correspondence and the closure order and the 90-day review and the community integration citation. Aired. She thought about the corridor schedule and the noise assessment and the calls she had made to community members. She thought about Biscuit. She thought about what the observation section had said. Aired. The unconditional offer, the willingness to wait, the absence of agenda. She wrote, the most important thing is that you mean it. Every part of it. The food, the welcome, the time you spend in the room. Aired. People know when something is real. They know when it's a program that exists to produce diplomatic outcomes and when it's a place that exists because you want it to exist. Aired. They respond differently to those things even when they look the same from outside. The program works because we want it to work, not as a means to something else, but as the thing itself. The community is the point, Aired, not the outcome. When that is true, the community feels it, and they come back, and they bring other people, and something real gets built. She paused, then she added, also get a dog if you can. I know how that sounds. Aired. I'm including it anyway. She sent the response. Senna replied within the hour. The reply said, I understand about the dog. What kind? Yemi laughed. She sent back, any kind. The kind that offers its paw. Aired. Biscuit turned 4 years old in the spring. Aired. Which was the human calendar designation for the time of year when the station's agricultural sections ran their growing cycle, and the air in the common corridors had a specific quality that the station's environmental systems produced and which the human residents associated with spring, regardless of whether the association was technically accurate. Aired. Biscuit's birthday was not a formal embassy event. It was a Friday, which meant the program was running. Aired. And someone had made something for it. The junior cultural attaché whose dog he was had made what she described as a dog-appropriate cake. Aired. And the people who were there when it came out had gathered around in the way people gathered around, things that were small and warm and slightly absurd in the best way. Yemi was at the table when this happened. Aired. She watched the gathering form, the 24 species room, finding a shared point of interest in a dog's birthday cake. Aired. The laughter that crossed the translation systems in the specific way that certain kinds of laughter crossed them. Biscuit ate his cake portion with considerable enthusiasm. Aired. He offered his paw to 7 different people in the 10 minutes following. He accepted the paw of a Karathi elder who had been coming for 6 months and who was, Yemi knew, not an easy person, stern in manner, aired, careful with contact, slow to warm, who had nonetheless taken Biscuit's paw the first time it was offered, and came every Friday and had told her once, briefly, that the program was good. Aired. She watched the elder take the paw and hold it for a moment and then release it. She watched Biscuit move on to the next offering. Aired. She thought about 2 years and a closure order and a citation and 24 species and all the formal and informal work that had gone into protecting something that, at its core, was this simple, a room. Aired. People in it. Something offered without conditions. She had been in diplomatic work for 16 years. She had done most of the things diplomatic work required, and she had done them well, and she knew they mattered. Aired. She still thought about the regional director's note, the one in her personal file, the one she had shared when Yemi asked whether the observation section was too unorthodox for the annual report. The director had said, aired, include it. The most important things are usually the ones we're least sure we're supposed to say. She thought, yes. She looked at the room. She thought, this is the most important thing. Not the one that's hardest to say. The one that's hardest to build and easiest to lose, and worth every bit of the work. Biscuit had finished his rounds. He came back to her corner of the room and sat by her chair with the settled contentment of an animal that had been where it wanted to be and was satisfied with how it had gone. She looked down at him. He looked up at her. He offered his paw. She took it. She held it for a moment. She let go. She went back to the program. The room continued around her, warm and full and exactly what it was supposed to be. Friday. The door opened, people coming in, the offer extended, the wait, the paw taken, again and again, one small moment at a time. Building the thing that formal records couldn't capture, and formal mechanisms couldn't replace, and formal orders couldn't close. The thing that was real, the thing they came back to. The final Friday of the year was the largest the program had run. No one had planned for it to be large. No announcement had gone out. It was simply the last Friday before the station's year-end period aired, when many residents took time away, and somehow the community had understood this and had come 47 people, 11 tables, 26 species, the most in the program's history. Yemi stood at the edge of the room at 11 and looked at it. She thought about the first Friday program she had run after taking over from Ambassador Chen. 12 people, 6 species, the particular small, warm quality of something that existed because someone had decided it should and was not yet sure it would amount to anything. She thought about 47 people and 26 species, and a dog moving through them with the same method he had always used. She thought about the closure order, filed on a Friday morning while the setup was happening. About 72 hours, about the meeting with Vel Morvian and the 7 documented concerns and the 87 days. She thought about what had been true on that Friday and was still true on this one. That the program was worth the work. She thought about what had been built. Not the formal record of it, the citation, the annual reports, the review documentation, the thing itself, the network of people who knew each other now who hadn't before, the Myrith family who had found a community they hadn't expected to find. Drell at his table, talking to the junior official who had started coming after the review, both of them comfortable in a space that had made room for that specific combination. She thought about the regional director's file note. What does it mean for practice that a dog can produce goodwill that formal diplomacy cannot? She thought, it means the goodwill was always available. It was always possible to produce. The question was only whether you were willing to show up and offer it without conditions and wait for it to be taken. Biscuit reached the far corner of the room, where a group of new faces had gathered. 3 Rethal, 2 Polari, a Korathi woman who appeared to be with them. Newcomers, all of them. The particular careful way of people in a space for the first time, not yet sure of the rules, he approached the closest of them. He sniffed. He sat. He offered his paw. The Rethal looked at the paw. He looked at his companions. He looked at the paw again. He took it. Yemi watched. She thought, there it is, still every time. She went to welcome the newcomers.